Unfortunately, the Chinese censorship is being carried out by Hollywood billionaires who are getting richer in the process. In recent days, it's been reported that one of Joe Biden's top potential choices to be ambassador to China is the former CEO of Disney, who happens to be a major Democratic donor. Disney just came out with the movie Mulan. In the movie Mulan, which the director described as, quote, a love letter to China. Well, this love letter wasn't subtle, because right in the credits at the end of Mulan, they thank the oppressive government forces who are running concentration camps right now with over 1 million Uyghurs imprisoned. Disney gleefully thanked the jackbooted thugs that are carrying out torture and murder, and apparently the leader of that effort is one of the top candidates to be America's ambassador to China. Well, the senator from Illinois, the senator from Connecticut said, we need to stand with people who are oppressed. I agree. Look, Hollywood could say whatever they want, but there's no reason the federal government should facilitate their censorship on behalf of the Chinese communists. And the Script Act simply says if you're going to let the Chinese communists censor your movies, you're not going to get access to the jet planes and to the ships and all the different material of the federal government that is used in movies. Moments ago, the senator from Connecticut said they want to be tough on China. Well, we're about to see how tough they are on China. I will happily yield for a question.
Can you tell me, if you were successful and if you hit Hollywood hard, how that provides any solace to the 6,700 Chinese and Hong Kong students in America who are facing the deportation back to prison in China?
Senator from Illinois asked a question. Let me tell you how it provides solace. Because people who are in hellholes, they listen to what we're saying. People who are in hellholes, they hear the voice. You know, some time ago, I had the chance to sit down with Natan Sharansky, the famed Soviet dissident. He and I sat down and visited in Jerusalem. And Natan told me about how when he was in a Soviet gulag, that in the cells, from cell to cell, they would pass notes. Did you hear what Ronald Reagan said? The Soviet Union is an evil empire. Marxism, Leninism will end up on the ash heap of history. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And I'll tell you how people here, because the senator from Illinois will remember, I introduced legislation to rename the street in front of the Chinese embassy in the United States, Liu Xiaobao Plaza, after Liu Xiaobao, the Nobel Peace Laureate, who was, let me finish answering your question. If you want to propound a second one, I'm happy to answer that one too. Liu Xiaobao was the Nobel Peace Laureate wrongfully imprisoned in China. And the strategy of renaming the street in front of the embassy is a strategy Reagan employed, renaming the street in front of the Soviet embassy Sakharov Plaza. Twice I stood on this floor seeking unanimous consent, and twice a Democrat, the senior senator from California, stood up and objected. And at one point, the senior senator from California said, well, if we do this, it will embarrass the Chinese government. To which I responded, you are understanding correctly, and that's not a bug, it's a feature. That is the purpose. And let me tell you what happened to that. Twice, Democrats objected to the legislation. I then placed a hold on President Obama's nominees to the State Department. And the Obama administration came to me and said, how can we move these nominees forward? How can we move them forward? I said, it's very simple. Pass my legislation and I'll lift the hold. The Democratic caucus didn't like that, but they ultimately agreed. And so the legislation I introduced to rename the street in front of the Chinese embassy, Liu Xiaobao Plaza, passed this body unanimously. Now, ultimately, the House didn't take it up and pass it up, but I'll tell you how that story ends. That story ends in 2017 when I was sitting down with Rex Tillerson for breakfast at Foggy Bottom, the new U.S. Secretary of State, and when he spoke to his Chinese counterparts, he said, they have come back and said among their top 3 diplomatic objectives with us is stop your bill to rename the street in front of the embassy. They are terrified by the sunlight and sunshine on the dissidents. At the time Liu Xiaobao had passed, But his widow, Liu Xia, was still in China, still wrongfully held back. And I told Secretary of State Tillerson, I said, I'll tell you what, you tell the Chinese, if they release Liu Xia, if they let her get out, I'll stop pressing this particular bill. And if they don't, I'll keep pressing it and we'll pass it again because we've already done it. Within weeks, China released Liu Xia. So you ask, how does this help the people in prison? By not having Hollywood media moguls spreading Chinese propaganda. But let me give you a second choice, very directly. You want to know how people are helped? A second bill called the SHAME Act, which, if our Democratic colleagues want to be tough in China, we could pass right now. What does the SHAME Act do? The SHAME Act focuses in particular on human rights atrocities. It focuses on over 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps and other religious minorities and the Falun Gong practitioners who are captured and murdered and whose organs are harvested. And the Chinese Communist Party engages in yet another horror. My Democratic colleagues like to say on the question of abortion they are pro-choice. Well, the Chinese Communist government right now is engaging in forced sterilizations and forced abortions, taking Uyghur mothers and forcing them to abort their children against their wills. Whatever the Democrats' views on abortion in the United States as a matter of a woman's choice, surely they must be united in saying a government forcing a woman to abort her child, to take the life of her unborn child, is an unspeakable atrocity. So the SHAME Act does something very simple. It imposes sanctions on the Chinese Communist government leaders responsible for implementing this horrific 1984-style policy of forced sterilizations and forced abortions. Now, I had intended to seek unanimous consent for the SHAME Act as well, but my Democratic colleagues have said they're not yet able to find a Democrat to object, although my understanding is they intend to. I hope they reconsider that. A terrific ending for today's debate would be passing the SHAME Act and saying we're all standing together against forced abortions and grotesque human rights violations. Maybe that will happen, maybe it won't. But let's find out where we are on the question of the SCRIPT Act.
Senator from Connecticut.
Reserving the right to object. I think we've gone a little bit far afield from the
That's it. Okay.
6 pro-democracy activists living abroad.
From Connecticut, I had not yet yielded the floor, and I'm about to ask the unanimous